Hi, everyone. Welcome. As you are joining, please feel free to write in the chat your name and where you're zooming in from. We're so excited to have you join us today. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Fun to, share your name, where you're zooming in from, so we know who's joining us on today's Zoom. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Okay, so we are going to get started right on time because we have awesome panelists and a lot of questions and want to make the most of our time together. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. And thank you for joining the Curious Cardinals community. I am Audrey Wisch. I am the co-founder and CEO of Curious Cardinals. And Curious Cardinals is a personalized mentorship platform for K-12 students. Today's panel is how to set your student up for success this school year from the perspective of STAR Asian Ivy League mentors. We're going to be talking everything from academic and study skills
interested to learn about the API vote. I don't like to get involved with government.
To finding the right extracurriculars and how you spend your time outside the classroom. Curious Cardinals, again, we are personalized mentorship for K-12 students, helping students find their North Star through personalized mentorship, learn the timeless skills through passion projects. We also support with academics, and the magic of our model is the personalized match. So it's all about learning from a mentor who you look up to and can see yourself in. Today we have a star panel of 3 amazing mentors. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to each of them to share their name, where they grew up, where they would go or went to school, and what they majored in, and what they mentor at Curious Cardinals. And then we're going to dive in. I'm going to hand it off to Olivia to please kick us off today.
Hi, everyone. My name's Olivia. I just graduated last spring, 2024, which is still crazy to say because it doesn't feel like that long ago at all. But I studied ethics, politics, and economics. I'm originally from New York. I live here now, and I've mentored students in like English and history, but also sort of like executive functioning, which is something that I care a lot about.
And you can hand it off to Matthew. And then
I'll hand it off to Matthew.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matthew Chang. I graduated from Harvard in 2023. I studied film production and government, and I mentor students in passion projects with Curious Cardinals. So it could be mostly film, entertainment related, sometimes creative writing and gaming.
All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Minjue. I take she, hers, and I graduated from Harvard off cycle in 2023. I studied 3 topics. So I had a double major in history of science, focusing on medicine and society. My second major was in molecular and cellular biology, focusing on neuroscience. And I had a minor in computer science where I did a fellowship with MIT called Breakthrough Tech AI. I've been with Curious Cardinals since 2023. It's been really a joy mentoring my students through a variety of different topics. So we've done anything from passion projects, starting an organization, to focusing on more topical subjects like competitions, to the more academic. So for example, tutoring specifically on math concepts or history or preparing for language. So yeah, it's been a wonderful journey, and I'll hand it back to Audrey.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And you're all here to learn from the wisdom of these amazing STAR college and recent grad mentors. What's the magic of our model, again, is that our mentors were in your kids' shoes not too long ago, and can serve as somewhat of an intermediary and love to shed light upon what they wish they knew. So let's dive in. Something that's remarkable about you all is your work ethic and your motivation and your passion and ambition. So I would love to start. Where did your work ethic come from? How did your parents shape that positively and even perhaps negatively at times? Whoever wants to start can take us away.
I can kick us off. So I think for me, I'm a first generation immigrant. So I came from China when I was 7 years old with my parents. And like to be perfectly honest, they chose a place that was great because there was a lot of wealthy residents in the area. So the public schooling system had a lot of funds, but we personally struggled a lot financially. So we were basically essentially on food stamps levels, but we didn't read English well enough to understand we could get assistance. So for us, it was like very much like being scrappy and trying to understand how can we make the most out of our circumstances. And one way that I knew I could do that, even though I was just a kid, is that if I got into a top college where they had a lot of financial aid, then I could potentially help sponsor my family by, getting a green card for them so they don't have to worry about residency. So for me, my work ethic kind of came from seeing how my parents basically strapped and saved for their whole lives, how they struggled and how they sacrificed. But also it can be really hard mentally and psychologically because you kind of are stuck in a system where you're thinking about what are my limited resources, and there's always this mindset of resource scarcity. I really wish that I did have a mentor growing up that was going through this process, and I did have some similar folks in my high school, but nothing was quite official. So going through that kind of alone, now I'm trying to serve that as my a mentor figure for my little sister and seeing how that changes her psychological well-being and how she manages to balance both her academic pursuits but also extracurriculars and her own like health and well-being has been really transformative in how I approach mentoring my kids too.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I can imagine the silver lining you shared and the amazing things you've accomplished with that, but also the stress that can carry as well. And it's amazing you're paying that back through mentorship. Olivia and Matthew, I'd love to hear your guys' perspectives on the topic of where your work ethic came from.
I can go. Yeah. Oh, sorry. So yeah, also I think like my family is also a family of immigrants that came to America after the genocide in Cambodia. And I think a lot of it was interesting about my growing up was same with a lot of like first gen, second gen immigrants is that their families don't they know how to get by, but they're not exactly adept on how America actually is, what goes on, what other people, what cultures there are, and how they interact with each other. And so for me, I think it was a lot of figuring out like, oh, like if I want to have a birthday party, I need to tell all the people in my who I want to have at my birthday party, come to my birthday party, have the invite, plan the day of the birthday party. And I think I think it's a lot of figuring that out. And I think my work ethic came up about not from exactly having, someone or a parent telling you, this is you should have a great work ethic. This is what you should do. It was more about figuring out, what did I want to do? Like, I want to have a birthday party. I want to, learn how to cook. I want to eat a quesadilla. So, and my mom's not making a quesadilla. So I learned how to cook quesadilla. And I guess that's how it started out. And it just transferred into other things.
Yeah, so my parent following the thread, my parents are also first gen. So I was born here in New York, but had like very close like relationships with my grandparents who were sort of like responsible for bringing my parents over. And I think I saw like a lot of like my work as being directly tied to like sacrifice, like, sort of like hedging on to the like sort of grueling work that it is to be an immigrant in this country. And especially to be first gen, and then to see sort of like the differences in like life that my parents gave me as opposed to the ones that they had. Like, they grew up in my mom grew up in Queens, and my dad spent his childhood in China until he was 20 and then came over for grad school. They eventually met in New York, but neither of them went to Ivy League schools. Like, they went to public school and made their way from there. But my sister and I had the resources growing up to be able to have like the best education and to And so to feel like you're not taking full advantage of that always just felt like such a waste to me. And so I'm sure there was some harm that came along with it too. Sorry, my dog is gonna pop up out of the corner. But for better or for worse, like I think feeling like you owe your generation above you something, and to like do better than the people who came before you, like that was a huge part of why I wanted to work hard. And so it didn't feel so much as like a pressure from them as it was just like a I want to do this for myself sort of thing.
Totally. That's wonderful that it felt like intrinsic motivation. To that end, we're joined here by 20 plus parents tonight who are probably wondering, it's awesome to hear this, and it's awesome to hear how your parents' stories and kind of that sense of responsibility and ownership cultivated motivation and ambition in you all. If you were to go back and give your parents kudos when you think about your middle school or high school self, what's one tactical thing your parent did right to help cultivate that motivation or support your dreams and your ambition? And hopefully parents can take it away as tactical advice that they can implement into their own parenting practices.
I could start with this one. I think that my parents were very much like my parents, up until I was in like middle school. Um, and then once I started high school, I think my parents sort of made the transition to like be my friend. And I went to boarding school for high school, so I wasn't always home. But that experience was honestly like awesome, because I watched a lot of my peers who maybe had like more strained relationships with their parents, sort of like maybe even look to other sources for advice or for example. And I think the fact that I had people who knew me were like obviously super invested in my growth and who I am as a person, give me sort of like the peer-to-peer advice was great because I am like the oldest sibling, so there wasn't like someone else to look up to. So I think like my parents sort of switching the approach, which can be really, really hard for first gen like Asian immigrants to do, from like being sort of like a emotionally removed part of your life to, being really, really intertwined with, you know, all the things from like friend drama to like, relationships, but also like the sort of day-to-day like academic stuff. Like they to know that I could go to them if there was ever any issue with anything in my life, like has saved me more than once. And
Oh,
now I'm like,
you went on mute. You're on mute.
yeah, my parents live in the city. They're like a 10-minute, ride away. And so like I still spend so much time with them and want to. And I think that's like hugely because they were able to like sort of let down the walls and be my friend.
Love that. That's so special. Matthew and Minju, any tactical things your parents did and kind of advice for the parents today as it pertains to cultivating that ambition and work ethic in their kids?
Yeah, I have one. I think my mom has taught me a lot of things and like helped me with a lot of things, but one thing she did really well was knowing when to get out of the way, when to let me figure out, this is what I want to do. Maybe letting me make those mistakes and realize, oh, that's maybe not what I want to do. I think that really just helped getting out of the way for me to explore on my own, even from a really young age, was really, really helpful.
I think that one thing I really took away, not from my own parents, I think, but from seeing my peers around me who are going through a lot of challenges and who are able to really resiliently work through them, is their parents kind of encouraging them to make mistakes and having failures as a sign of growth. I think one of the models that really struck me, from one of my closest friends growing up, is like their parents always told them, fail again, but fail better next time. And so in, I think, very conservative Asian households where me and my cousins came from, a lot of it is like, oh, like as a first generation immigrant, you're kind of a mascot for your community, so that if you mess up, it kind of reflects badly on everyone around you. So there can be a huge amount of stigma on like not being perfect or not making the next calculated move to optimize what you already have. But I think some things that I really took back and which my parents try to do now with my little sister is try to seeing the power of what does it mean to pursue divergent paths and just try to be the most fulfilled and the most satisfied with how much you put in, as opposed to any accolades or sort of like what are the results tangibly that come out in the short term. So I think that's really reshaped how I approach life in general. But it's something I wish I definitely had more of from my parents in high school as well.
Thank you all for sharing. That's super, super helpful. I love the specific example. Sounds like you all have amazing parents, which is no surprise because you are all exceptional. Shifting to high school, I'd love to hear, were you guys always Harvard and Yale set? Were those the dreams? Were you always a super motivated, straight A student type kids? Kind of when did that intensity kick into gear? When did dreams of Harvard or Yale enter your imagination or kind of the scope of what was possible? And how much did you think about college throughout your high school journey? Olivia, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. I would say I thought about college all the time. It like definitely was like a sort of like fire under my butt, like the entire way through. Um, I would say that intensity probably like really picked up in 8th grade. Like I kind of think that's the age, like 13, 14, when you like really start to like gain consciousness of like, what you want to do, what you want to be, the type of person that like you one day want to become. And yeah, I think like the dream was like always to go to a really, really exceptional school. I will say like I probably couldn't have done it if that was the expectation. I think because I was sort of told like just do your best and that's good enough. I like set that limit for myself that like that was the goal. The fact that it ended up working out was awesome, but I knew that even if like Ivy League wasn't going to be the result, like I wouldn't have faced like any sort of like repercussion as long as that my parents knew that there was like effort there. Um, but I think like having sort of like a motivated kid is like in some ways even worse because you see them sort of like work themselves into like fret. And managing that is sort of like a whole nother beast for sure.
I would say maybe around like sophomore year when uh, everyone started doing like the college, like the school started doing like college prep, like, telling us like, oh, we need to start studying for the SAT. That's when I first was like, whoa, like, why not aim for the top? It'd be sick. Um, but I think I think it was funny actually ended up getting in. My mom still wanted me to go to UCLA because that was our like always like because we were always gunning for UCLA because it was like close to home, like a good college close to home because I'm from Palm Springs, California. Um, but I think I really kept it to myself. So like I didn't tell my mom I was really like Harvard, like I'm gonna like go there until like I got in, and then she was like, we should really think about this. But I think yeah, like it was kind of like a late genesis, like really realizing like, oh, like you know, there's a possibility. Yeah.
Okay, very different than Olivia. Minju, I'm curious where you fall on this.
Yeah, so I think I was probably the extreme end. So my parents moved when I was 7 to Ohio, and they picked the school district, even though the cost of living was higher, specifically because of the education. And when I was 9, my parents actually asked me, like, okay, so like you're a big kid now, like you should know like what your life plan is. So like, what university do you want to go to? Have you thought about that? And so growing up in China, the textbooks we used were all created by Oxford. And so I thought like, oh, like Oxford's a great university, I'll say that. And then they were so angry. And I was like, what's going on? They're like, we came all the way to America to get you a green card so you can go to Harvard or Yale. And you want to go to England where we have no ties. And I was like, huh? I'm 9 years old. I don't know what's going on. So it was like they're very early on. But like to be very pragmatic though, like they had basically shifted their entire lives. For me, because they saw that I had a lot of potential when I was growing up in elementary school, and they were like, okay, like there's nowhere else for us to go, even as first generation college graduates themselves. In China, they were like, okay, like there's only so much that you can connect with, and we heard that America was this next great opportunity. So I knew like very frankly that like our finances were not great. So my options for going to college were either I get a full ride, merit ride somewhere, or I go to a college that was wealthy enough that they could fund or even pay me to go. And so that left very few options. So it was either the top state schools that had full rides, or it was one of the Ivies. So the pressure was like very much like work us up to the bone. And of course, as a first generation immigrant, we had no idea what we were doing because my parents didn't even know by the end when I got into Harvard what a Common App was. They had no idea what my teachers were doing. Even like throughout undergrad, they were like, okay, like so you sort of do your own thing. I'm going to be a consultant starting in January with Boston Consulting Group. They're like, we don't even know what that is, but we're glad they're making money. So a lot of it was just like trial and error and trying to be the best at whatever I invested time into because I knew that I didn't have time to afford making mistakes a lot when I was going through high school. I would say that that created a lot of mental pressure and it wasn't always productive. One thing that really affirmed this was when I got into Harvard. So the policy is that you can always request to see your admissions files to see what kind of aspects helped, catch the eye of the admission officers who argued for you. And the things that they mentioned in there were two things that I spent relatively little time on that was in their eyes was remarkable, but which for me was just like another sort of thing on my plate, right? And then so if I had really wanted to achieve the same results, I could have had a lot more of a relaxed, more self-exploratory type of journey throughout high school. But because I was kind of so busy turning at the wheels to get to this outcome, which like very understandable for the amount of stress like financially that my family was in, but not really productive for really long-term growth. And it took me a lot of time to work through that in college as well to find out what my true passions are and where I want to go for afterwards for career development, for personal development, etc. Yeah, I could have definitely planned that a lot better had I had a different kind of perspective. So yeah, very different trajectory, I think, from both Matthew and Olivia. But we all, came out of it alive. So I think, yeah, definitely different pathways to the same spots.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love how different perspectives you all bring to the table. To that end, looking back on high school, we all know how competitive the process is. I'm sure everyone at some point when you went to these amazing schools maybe had a sense of imposter syndrome, but there's of course a reason that you got into these schools. And so I'm curious, looking back on your high school journey, what's maybe the two things you did that you're really proud of that distinguish you, but also felt authentic to you and is something that you spent your time on that lit you up, and then also made a big difference in differentiating you in the competitive college process?
I can start us off maybe. So I think the two things that I was probably most proud of was like one, I always wanted to study literature. I thought I was going to be a literature professor growing up in China. And then when I'm to the US, I was like, oh, I'll just be a writer. And so like language was always the way that I felt most connected. And I felt like the same way that like someone might feel very satisfied after like mastering move in karate. Like me like using words and like being able to shape that to bring joy or to bring like a completely different reality into perspective was something that I really enjoyed. But my parents didn't really focus too much on that because where they were growing up, STEM was always like the field that was going to be the most lucrative. So it was directly sort of against like their concerns that I spent a lot of time shaping and crafting a portfolio of like writings from high school. And that was one of the things that I really enjoyed was like both tutoring as well as producing creative portfolios for different competitions. And so that's one thing that really stood out for admission officers as well. The second thing is trying science research. And so my school had a science research program, which was essentially just a set of instructions of go and email like as many PIs as you possibly could, beg to be let into the lab, expect a lot of like rejections, and then hopefully you can learn a little bit of wet lab skills. So I ended up doing research for 4 years at Ohio State University on gene editing impacts on oncology, specifically focusing on prostate cancer, and ended up being able to go to international science fairs and meet a lot of really cool people through that, and which I never had the option or like even the like imagination to think like this could be possibly something that happened. Like the first time I've ever gone on an airplane was from China to the US, and the second time ever was when they paid for me to go to Arizona from Ohio to the International State Science and Engineering Fair. So I ended up going twice, and it was like both like 2 times of highlights of my high school experience. So that was really wonderful.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. One, seeing how authentic you light up with passion talking about these experiences and how cool it is that you combined literature portfolio to medical research at the highest level. That's awesome. Matthew and Olivia, does any kind of two things stand out to you again that both you're really proud of looking back on, but also you lit up with genuine passion as well?
Yeah, I'll go. So let's see. In college, or no, in high school, I was part of this program called Youth in Government, which I would actually call it's like it's not like intense. Like I know like some like government programs are super intense in high school. It was more like a fun social organization where 3 times a year you would meet up like a statewide California meetup with all the other YMCA youth and government branches, and then like you got to like make bills or like learn about the branches of government and just like made friends. And so it's really fun. And this was actually after I'd gotten in. I actually, I never even had any interest in running for like some statewide position. We were talking to one of my friends and I was like, all the other like delegations, they called it, always have people in like the statewide office, but we never do because like I'm from Palm Desert, which is like there weren't that many people. Like the bigger branches were from like LA, San Francisco. They had like hundreds of people. We had like like 20. So we're never had our name on the map. I was chatting with my friend. I was like we were like, oh, like yeah, but no one, like why would we ever run? And then like I was like, yeah, why not? So I just like did it. And I ran a campaign, statewide campaign, my like senior year, just cause I was like, why not have our name on the map, have someone in statewide office? I did a speech in front of like 3,000 people. It was crazy, about Pokemon, actually, about Pokemon. And then got elected, and then it really like reinvigorated like my group, like and which was like really exciting. Like people were like, yeah, we're from that delegation. That was one thing that I really liked. That was good memory. Second, uh, oh, I I did this program called Academic World Quest, and it was like you learn about a topic you're interested in. Like my topic, I think like senior year was like infectious diseases, and my topic like junior year was like women in technology. And then you go to like this trivia thing, and we made it through the first round because there weren't too many teams, and then we made it to the world competition, um, which is actually crazy. You only need one, like make it through one competition first to make it to worlds. But then my teacher's always like, yeah, like the other people are intense. Like we're just going like for a free trip to DC, and so we were like, no way. So we studied so hard and actually got second in the world, which was crazy. But yeah, no, that was another thing. Just like I think those two things were like, you didn't have to do it. You didn't have to like people told you didn't have to do it. Like people were like, why would you even do that? And just doing it and do just like why not? Why notting it? Really just like kind of made a lot of my high school career. So yeah, those were two things I really remember.
Love it. And while I respect your nonchalance, you are a humble Harvard overachiever. So that's the greatness, is it's clear you do this with genuine passion. And Olivia, what about for you? Are there kind of two things from high school both you're most proud of, but also proud of how you pursued with real passion?
Yeah, I keep it short because I definitely want to leave time for questions later. But I think the first is Model UN, which I think every high schooler kind of does. But mine is not so much like because, of Model UN itself, but I think in doing it, I learned a lot of skills that I think I applied even throughout college when I was thinking about what I wanted to do post grad. A lot of Model UN is like, using your voice, like trying to collaborate with different people. Wanting to be able to work with teams that have like really diversifying like priorities and positions, and like trying to reconcile all of that into a solution. And I think I've had a lot of like experiences in college where I was presented with sort of options that were like more independent work, like more sort of just like working in a silo, and others that were definitely like more group oriented, especially even post grad, like changing roles, I've had that experience. And so I think even now, like I'm 23, like I still lean on the experiences that I had when I was like 13 and 14, 15 in Model UN, like back to those sort of passions that I cared the most about. And then I think the second is my internship, my sort of like junior year of high school. I basically had this sort of mentor. Her name is Wanda Holland Green. She's the head of school at Hamlin, which is actually a school in San Francisco. And it's an all girls like K-9 school. And she really, in sort of like the higher education environment, is really an advocate for sort of diversity, all girls education. And so I basically, I mean, even to this day, we laugh about it, like cold emailed her for 6 months and didn't get a response, because I just wanted to like sort of hear about how she had built up her experience, from when she was, you know, a girl at Chapin in Columbia, to now like leading one of like the most, I think like inspiring like, you know, primary schools out there. One day I think she was getting on a plane. She was like, all right, I got to answer this girl. She's so annoying. She responded, and then, you know, what became sort of like a chain of emails, I ended up flying out there and spending 3 months in, you know, literally living in her house. She had never met me before. We had like no connection. And I learned so much that summer. I, you know, didn't end up going into education right out of school, but it's something I discovered that I really cared about. It's why I'm a Curious Cardinal mentor. It's like why I continue to try and, you know, have mentorship in all parts of my life. And so, that was something where like it didn't feel like work. Like it was just fun for me, because I really cared that much. And I see in the comments that you know Wanda, which is crazy. She's amazing. But yeah, I think that definitely shaped a lot, and it is an experience that I still think about now.
That is so inspiring and awesome. And yes, we have so many Hamlin families who work with Curious Cardinals. So I will be sharing a clip of this. That's awesome. And again, it's amazing to hear how you put yourself out there and took initiative and chased genuine interest and what opportunities came from that. And it's clear, you're cultivating champions, you're cultivating people who go to bat for you. And that makes a difference, not only personally, emotionally, but also in terms of opening doors. So Matthew, I want to hone in on you. You are pursuing an unconventional path in film. This can be difficult for parents, especially immigrant parents who want their Harvard grad to pursue a more linear path. Talk to us about how you found yourself pursuing film and taking the more creative, nonlinear path, and how your parents responded or supported and nurtured this journey, and what advice you have for parents whose kids are interested in pursuing less conventional pathways.
Yeah. So you think for a second. So I did a lot of STEM in high school. Um, and I was pretty good at STEM. And then I think what's nice about like an Ivy League or a lot of like school colleges is that they give like a really liberal arts education. So they really try to just, you know, force you to take these like common curriculum, something like that, where you know, take courses in a whole bunch of different things and they force you to take arts and stuff. I was always interested in arts. Um, but the thing that really drew me to it is how kind of, I think in the math classes and the science classes, I always felt like I was, you know, learning about something set. Like I was studying, you know, like uh, past research. I know eventually you do your own research, but like research, like facts and stuff. But I was really drawn to this field where you're really unsure like what you're even aiming for. Like, yeah, you want to make a movie. Yeah, you want to write something great, but like what are you even aiming for? And I found that to be super interesting for my own personal development because it gave me really a chance to explore myself and the world around me in a way that I felt was different than if I were to study something else. And so that's what really drew me to that in opposed to like a more STEM career. Um, I I guess, of course, I'm scared. So of course my family's gonna be scared because still I'm like working, I'm deep in Hollywood right now, and it's like what is even going on with entertainment? Like, but I think I think for me, one, I was thankful my mom came around to it. Learning to quell her and my family's fears, but also realizing that, even though they put in so much for me, it's also my own decision. And I think they would be happier if they knew they eventually will be happier if they knew I wasn't unhappy with what I was doing. I think that's what really helped me really pursue it because honestly, like, sometimes they say like parents like always do what's in the best interest of your kids. Like I was trying to do what's in the best interest of my parents, which is I knew that they cared about me so much that if I pursued something that I wasn't really drawn to, they would know. I think a lot of times, it's easy to just like do what will be best for your family. But I think like in the short term, but I think maybe in the long term, I thought this could be, um, better. And I was really just, I don't know. I forgot the rest of the question. I, I know there are a few parts to it, but yeah, overall, I was just interested in pursuing something that was unknown, where I could explore more about things that I didn't know, like I would be getting into, like in a class, like you go, like a science class, you go in and they have the set curriculum, um, about we're going to study this textbook, this part of the textbook, but I think I was more drawn to like what are we not studying? Like, how can I go over there and
Yeah.
see? Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing that. To the parents here, we are going to open up to questions in a few minutes. So if you want to start writing your questions in the chat, please do, so we can call on you. So a little bit about kind of what you mentor in at Curious Cardinals. I'd love to hear, what do each of you mentor in at Curious Cardinals, and why do you mentor at Curious Cardinals? Why do you wish you had a Curious Cardinals mentor? Maybe Minju, you could start us off.
Yeah, so I think my background is like kind of all over the place. So as I mentioned, did history of medicine. So that was a combination of historical analysis, anthropology, sociology, as well as like medical sciences. And then also did neuroscience research. So I did neural stem cell research at Harvard. And before that, it was genetic editing in cancer and oncology studies, and then computer science and AI. So I've kind of tutored in all of those subjects, plus a couple others, like for example, policy or advocacy, working in like public service organizations, club managements. I guess like some of my recent examples is like I had a mentee who was really interested in learning more about AI. So every week we would basically tackle a couple of like the latest like AI breakthroughs, summarize that in a newsletter, and then help her sort of formulate like a community like AI like 101 newsletter for parents and students at her school. Another student was working on starting like a veterinary club at her high school for the first time. So she was a sophomore. She was like, I didn't know what is going on, how to manage. And then we went from 0 to over 100 members in the first couple of months, which was really cool. And then a couple other students were doing more niche subjects. So right now I'm working with someone in just 2 hours on developing a National History Days project. And then later on with another kid who is just looking for straightforward math tutoring. So it can like vary very widely, but something I really appreciate about the Curious Cardinals mentorship like philosophy is that I never felt quite right tutoring for most subjects during undergrad as well as in high school, because I felt very transactional. So like you come in, you have like these XYZ specific goals, and then you kind of just leave. And there's never really anything sustained, nor was it really personalized. For me, I really value longitudinal relationships, and I especially want to tailor all of the interchangeable like sort of experiences with the specific background of a student who I can watch grow over time. And I still keep in touch with a lot of my mentees who have graduated from the program from the last 2 years as well. So Curious Cardinals, I think, is really special because it specifically focuses on how do you build that sort of rapport between your kid and someone that they look up to that they potentially could follow in their past in the future, and sort of see like, okay, like very real and raw, what does it take for you not to only have the technical skills to be able to complete a task, but also what is kind of the mentality, what are the connections, and what are the broader communities you can bring in to help you grow.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Olivia and then Matthew.
So I studied ethics, politics, and economics. So a lot of what I mentor in is sort of like similarly related to that. I've done history, I've done English, but I also do executive functioning, which is definitely something that sort of goes like under the radar when it comes to mentorship, but I think really is like the bedrock for having a good work ethic. Like if working hard is it's sort of sounds like counterintuitive, but if working hard is easy, then all the other stuff like is much easier to develop, right? Like if you have the foundation to be able to learn, to study, to work, then the actual process of like absorbing information and growing off of that is a lot easier. And so I think that those are like two things that like definitely have been really, really fun, honestly, to mentor in. The reason I do it with Curious Cardinals, and not any of the other programs that are out there, because there's a ton, is honestly because I really respect the near peer model. I think when I think about like when I was in middle school and elementary school, like the people I looked up to were the people 5 or 6 years older than me. Like, the one day I'll be like that. Like adults are a little too far away, in my opinion. And so like having seen the impact and like how badly, sort of I wished that I had like a near peer mentor, it's been really wonderful to be able to do that in this setting. And a lot of really, really wonderful relationships have been formed, just as much as I learn, just as much as like I would hope my mentee is learning from me. Like I actually learn a lot about myself from mentoring. How to teach, how to be more patient, right? Like being a good teacher isn't necessarily about how much you know, it's about how you can share what you know in a way that's understandable to other people. And so like learning a lot through Curious Cardinals is not just on the side of the mentee, it's on the side of the mentor too.
Yeah, thank you. And then Matthew, what have you mentored in? Why mentor? Why do you mentor?
Yes, I mentor because it is so fun working with um, mentees on creative projects. I mean, I feel like what I've thought about is like I feel like everyone has creative ideas, or like thoughts like, oh, that could be a movie, that should be a TV show, that should be, I don't know, something like that could be a book. But I think with my experience in college, it was a lot of figuring out, how do I make a movie randomly? Like, do I reach out to these people? How do I find actors? Blah, 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 putting the project together. And so I use that experience to really help, these mentees with who have ideas. Like maybe they're like, oh, I watched this movie and I really like, you know, the the monster from this movie. I wonder like the life of this monster, like like does it have a family? And then I'm like, okay, let's think about that. We talk about like the possibilities in this world. Talk about like the best vehicle to get it out of, like, is it a short film, a feature film script, like a poem even, like, and so I mentor in like turning ideas into something tangible that's that makes the idea not just a fleeting idea that you forget about in your sleep. Yeah, and so I do a lot of that, and I really find it really awesome. And so some of these, like, and some like all my students or all my mentees have ideas that like I like read like 15 like Hollywood scripts a week. I listen to some of their ideas and I'm like, this, like, if we can get this, like, this could sell for like 1 million or something. So they have amazing ideas, just like cultivating that, and working with them on that. So they also help me get creative inspiration too.
Amazing. And we were super proud of one of your students you've been working with for a while, who won all these awards for his film script. So we see that. Got to for our first question. I see Minju's already replying from Jason, who wants to ask it out loud, but his 3.5-year-old just walked in. Jason asked 2 questions. He asked, one, when you mentor a teen, what's something they do or display that impresses you and makes you think, yeah, that person will get into XYZ? And 2, what is a characteristic you feel many teens are lacking and recommend developing?
I think that something that I've observed in sort of like younger students that I'm like, whoa, this is awesome. And this is like someone who has it together, is the ability to like switch between bigger picture and like smaller picture. I think like after you sort of like review a topic, it's really easy to sort of get into the weeds and then lose sight of like where that sits in the scheme of like all the things that you need to accomplish that day, but also all the other things that you have going on and like what learning this smaller detail means in the grand scheme of like all the other stuff. And I think, students who after we finish a call will be like, okay, like I understand this. This is how it fits into the subject that we're talking about. And like, this is where we'll move on in the next session. Like, sort of being able to take their learning into their own hands. That's something where I'm like, whoa, like they have sort of the skills that they need to be able to um, organize their own learning and be responsible for their own sort of like trajectory. And then I think something that sort of like kids now are probably missing. I'm gonna have to second Minju's first point about being brave. I think like social media, AI, like all of these things are kind of terrifying. We're sort of the last generation that got to grow up without having cell phones in our hands when we're like 5. And I still sort of feel sometimes like socially stunted and like not super brave. I think the ability to like walk up to people who you might not know a lot about, might not share a lot with, and still be able to have a meaningful conversation and hear their perspective and be brave enough to even initiate that is something to really work on with kids.
Love it. Super, super thoughtful. I can add there, speaking to parents and students every day on the number one, what really stands out to me. Yeah, I probably speak with at least a high schooler every day for the past 5 years, if not multiple. One is initiative and combined with work ethic, the type of kid like Olivia who finds someone they want to learn from, like Wanda, who's a leader in education, reaches out, follows up, flies across the country and learns from them. That's something really rare. And it's initiative combined with work ethic. Very few kids have, and I know kids going somewhere if they have it. 2 is curiosity. It's someone who genuinely has a desire to learn and seek understanding and knowledge in the world, whether that's going deeper in the minutia, as Olivia said, or being able to broaden out to the bigger picture. I would say initiative, work ethic, and curiosity. And then what's lacking, there's a lot, but specifically, since you're speaking of phones, I'm getting very involved in a documentary called The Drug in Our Pocket, which will be coming out next year. And a big thing we talk about is attention fragmentation and resilience. Parents come to us every day, kids lack resilience, they lack patience, and great things take time. And our social media, growing up online, you can access any piece of information instantaneously. And so building the resilience and patience in kids to work through the hard things is so important and unfortunately so rare in this moment in time. Thanks, Jason, for really thoughtful questions. Anyone else here have any questions for our amazing panelists? You can write in the chat. Yeah, Alex. Please ask away. Oh, Alex doesn't have a question. Or do you? Does anyone else? I have lots of other questions if not, but does anyone else have a question they want to ask our awesome panelists? We love hearing from you. Please. Give it a bit. Any other questions? Any questions imaginable? Any reflections? We love feeling you here. Go off mute, show video. Love it. Hong has a 4-year-old who's curious and self-motivated. And awesome, you're here for her. You're putting in the work early. I'm sure she'll be grateful, Hong. Any other questions from anyone here? Okay, well, if there aren't any other questions, my final question for you panelists is, if you could go back in time and give advice to your parents of your high school self, what would you tell them?
I think for mine, there was like a lot of ethics about like, oh, like you have to be self-starting, like pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And if you can't, then like you have to redirect your focus. But I think there's just like such a powerful Asian American community that is like very much aligned in terms of like our passion for education and making a better path for our kids. So like I would say like feel brave and bold in terms of reaching out for help when you feel like you're limited. Yeah.
Either of you go for it.
You
Okay,
go.
you go. No,
Okay, you go, then Olivia.
I can go.
I was gonna say I need to keep thinking, so you go.
Okay, I'll go. I think that I actually had like a really great relationship with my parents like throughout high school. Even though both sides I think were like perpetually stressed about what was going to happen at the end of it. And like 14 to 18 is just such a hard time no matter what. There's like you're going through puberty. There's so much like coming of age and self-discovery that happens when you're in high school. I think the same advice that I give, sort of earlier in this panel is what I would have given my parents, which is to be longer sighted. I think that a lot of the sort of like day-to-day things that happened that I felt like set me back a lot in high school, or things that really bothered me when I was in high school, like now, 8 years later, I don't even think about it. Like it just doesn't even, it does, I don't sweat at night at all thinking about it. But at the time it had such a big impact on me. And I think, it like also seeped into my like parents and like it definitely really bothered them. But all of those like little setbacks or little disappointments or, things that hurt in the moment, like actually end up teaching you a lot about yourself. Nothing really grows from being comfortable. Like in all the moments that I've been the most uncomfortable, especially going away for school when I was so young, like it taught me a lot about myself that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And I think despite the fact that it really sucked in the moment and there were things that like, my parents being so far away couldn't control, I think if both parties sort of like took a step back and realized like it all really does work out, like as long as the values that you have of like working hard, being curious, staying motivated, not being complacent, and like being honest with yourself about what you want and how you can get there, like as long as those things ring true for the 4 years of high school, like you'll end up okay. Like, and I think it's easy to sort of feel like small setbacks are the setback. But that fortunately is just not true. And so to sort of like keep the faith, like good things happen to those who deserve it. And yeah, like everything does like end up the way it's supposed to. Not to say that like good mentorship won't like ease the path there. But to have like a longer sighted view for sure.
Matthew?
If I were to tell my parents something, it would be Not that they didn't, but I would say even more so, just really take care of yourself, because I feel like a lot of times, especially in Asian American families, a lot of the focus is on like the kid and like how you can get your family and your kid to be the most successful. I think I think it's helpful because like really making sure you know what you like maybe get some hobbies, get some like friends that really are also your rock outside. Like things outside of the family are really important, especially when your kid goes off to college and off in the real world. I think it's really important for, a parent to just have things like that to really ground them outside of the family. And also, I think having a parent who is really, I don't know, interested in something specific, even if the kid isn't, like, could be really helpful for the kid's like understanding of what there is. Like, I don't know, even going to the spa, like take a spa day and tell your kid I'm going to the spa. And then 10 years later, you're like, the kid's like having some anxiety and you're like, maybe I'll go to a spa. And that's what my mom did. And yeah, no, doing things and making sure to take care of yourself, I think really actually like really helpful for the kid actually.
Love it. We had a question in the chat about Curious Cardinals for ages. So just to clarify, Curious Cardinals, we have two main tracks. We have academic mentorship, which is like tutoring, but tutoring we say is the T word. And whether you come to work on writing or math or cultivate executive function, like Olivia teaches, applied to academics, it's not only about building the confidence and skill set to ace Friday's test, it's about building the skill set to learn for life. And the other, our core offering, is the Passion Project, where we help students hone their interests and bring them to life through real world projects, whether that's conducting research, writing a op-ed, writing a screenplay that wins an award, like Matthew has guided many students to do, starting an organization, a podcast. We help, rather than cookie cutter extracurriculars, really identify what the niche interest students have and bring them to life through passion projects. And of course, we learn project management, executive function, how to have a dream and put it in the work week over week. And those are the core offerings at Curious Cardinals. We work with kids K through 12. We're mostly middle and high school. We work with a lot of gifted and talented lower schoolers who are insatiable with their curiosity and want to accelerate and learn and take to the next level. With middle schoolers, honestly, we love starting early on, because as soon as you start high school, as Olivia said, 8th grade even, a lot of students begin thinking about college and there becomes a lot of pressure and expectation. And when you start with Curious Cardinals in middle school, you are identifying and exploring interests, and that just becomes embedded in the very fiber of your being. That's the type of person you are. You're a kid with interests who pursues those interests. So we love starting younger. And how it works at Curious Cardinals, if you want to sign up, is you schedule a consultation call with our team. You have a conversation. We ask a lot of questions and want to really lead with curiosity and understand who is your child, what are their interests, what are their areas for growth and their goals, who's a dream mentor match for them. From there, we follow up with a learning proposal and a mentor match, and you're connected to a mentor and have weekly sessions and go from there. That's a little bit of how Curious Cardinals works. I'm mindful of the time we have right now, so I want to Hong, I will follow up with you personally, or we can answer that question just after this. Anyone has to head out, but thank you all so much for coming here today. And please give a special thank you to Matthew, Olivia, and Minju. We're so grateful for all your wisdom. We're so lucky to have you as mentors at Curious Cardinals. I mean, wouldn't you want these to be the young near peer mentors your children get to learn from? I'm so inspired by each and every one of you. And it reminds me why we do what we do, because you are the amazing young people I think every parent wants for their kid to be inspired by and learn from. So thank you guys so much for your time today. And thank you, thoughtful parents, for coming. Your kid might not thank you today, but they will thank you one day.